Why don't we each give you a short statement, and then y'all can ask whatever questions you'd like to ask. The Ford family obviously has suffered a great loss in Wendell Ford's passing, and our thoughts and prayers go out to them first of all in their time of mourning. This state has also suffered a huge loss. Wendell Ford was one of the most effective political leaders that this state has ever seen. He was an amazing governor, he was an amazing U.S. senator, and you know, he had some traits that too few politicians today have. Number one, he listened. He could actually quit talking long enough to listen. And he learned a lot in that way, and he made a lot of things happen because he listened. He cared deeply about this state and about its people. And then he had a knack of making things happen. He could bring both sides together and get something done and move this state and this country ahead. So we won't see another one like Wendell Ford for a long, long time, and we certainly mourn his passing.
This is a loss, as the governor said, that touches so many Kentuckians in our hearts, because people in this state, especially those of us who touched Senator Ford personally, are deeply moved by his passing and his loss. In my case, I went to work for him my very first job out of college in his U.S. Senate campaign in 1974. So for 40 years, he's been my best mentor and my friend. And I feel that very personally, that loss. As the governor has said, his family also feels a great loss. But Wendell Ford loved that family. You know, he has left a powerful legacy with a wonderful son and daughter and grandchildren who will carry on his spirit, and we extend our condolences to them today. The other thing about Wendell Ford that leaves such a powerful mark, I think, is today when we see what's happening in Washington and we see so much discord, Wendell Ford was truly a statesman in every sense of the word. He knew how to reach across the aisle. He knew how to form relationships and friendships with the other side. I was recently with Senator Ellen Simpson, who told me stories about him at a panel discussion in Lexington, and obviously they were on opposite sides of the aisle, but he knew how to get things done, and he had great respect from people and leaders of both parties, and we could use a few more Wendell Fords in Washington today.
What do you think his greatest legacy as governor would be?
Senator Ford came along at a time when the state was in pretty good shape and moving forward. He added to that momentum in a number of ways while he was here as governor. You know, he was only here 3 years and then went on to the United States Senate. But in those 3 years, he provided effective leadership. He kept building on that momentum that had started. He passed a no-fault insurance law in the state. He strengthened the council on higher education. He addressed different tax issues. He really established the modern public defender program. So there's a string of issues that add up to a great legacy as governor. And then of course he went on to the United States Senate and served there for those many years. And you know, no less important a person than President Clinton. When we had a ceremony in Owensboro in honor of Senator Ford, said that he could not have gotten many of the things passed in Congress if it hadn't been for Wendell Ford as the majority whip. And Wendell was one of those people that worked behind the scenes. And he didn't seek the glory, he didn't seek the upfront recognition. He was satisfied with making things happen, and he knew how to do it, and he did it well.
What's your favorite Senator Ford story? I guess you don't mind telling if you can. Anything that something that sticks out from you that just kind of really says who he was, what kind of person he was.
One of the first times that I was able to get a lot of exposure to Senator Ford was when he was governor, and I was first elected to the House of Representatives from Lexington. And I came over during that first session and got to know him to some extent at that time. But I remember when Derby Day rolled around that year, this was in 1974, and the the mansion was opened for the Derby breakfast, and Governor Ford then and Jean Ford, the First Lady, stood at that front door of the governor's mansion and greeted thousands of people as they came through and had a personal word for everybody. And that was just the kind of guy he was. He could talk to anybody and be on your level no matter what economic condition you might find yourself in. He could communicate with you. He described himself, as many of you know, as the country boy from Yellow Creek. And he never lost that kind of touch, that common touch that made him lovable in terms of Kentuckians.
Governor, have you received any word on arrangements and if Senator Ford body will lie and stay in the rotunda?
We haven't received any final arrangements yet. We're working with the family. We've obviously offered to do anything and everything that they would like for us to do. We certainly hope that they will decide that he lies in state in the Capitol Rotunda, and I think that will happen. He certainly deserves that honor as one of Kentucky's greatest leaders.
Either one of you see evidence of his legacy today, in either in the candidates that are running for office or already in office, or the issues that they're advocating for?
Well, there's not a Democratic candidate in the last 20 years plus that hasn't sought his advice and counsel, and he's been there for every candidate. I personally made the pilgrimage to talk to him before I ran for statewide office. I think just about everybody we know has. And he also leaves a powerful legacy of people who were part of his administration in Frankfurt and in Washington, who went on to careers of public service that were meaningful. At the event Governor Beshear mentioned in Owensboro a couple of years ago, we were raising money for his education center that he established in Owensboro. And at that event, we had people come back who were all over the world. People came in from London and New York and Washington, and powerful leaders in public and private sector who were there because of their relationship with Wendell Ford and his mentoring of them younger in their lives. And they're scattered all around, and that's another part of his powerful legacy, is when he touched a young person, he made a difference in their lives, and they looked to him as a role model and went on to serve in many meaningful ways. And I think that's another piece of his legacy that is sort of a quiet legacy that exists all around.
We saw that just recently when Jane and I were honored to host he and Jean at the governor's mansion for his 90th birthday celebration. And we invited all of his former staff, all of the people who had worked for him, both as governor and in the U.S. Senate. And I mean, the world turned out. They came from all over the world to come back and visit with him just for a few minutes. Most of them just to say thank you.
And that was just in September.
A personal question here. This office is a very special place. Did the thought cross you today that he occupied this room here too?
I've had that thought
presence.
many times. I'll tell you, from the time I walked in here, I would talk to Senator Ford from time to time just to bounce ideas off of him, to get his advice and counsel on things. He was a great mentor to me. And I can still remember when I came in here, I said, if I can be half as good a governor as he was, I'd be a success.
Was there a sense that he wanted to come back and serve as governor? Because we had heard, of course, back in '91 there were some rumors that he might come back and run then, and there was always a question as to whether he ran for Senate was entirely his idea, whether he had to be coaxed into it to leave the governor's office. Did you ever get a sense that he missed being governor?
I think he certainly missed being governor from the standpoint of what you can accomplish in political office. He said many times there's a world of difference between being a governor and being in the United States Senate. He said, as governor, you can make a few phone calls and you can make something happen. In the U.S. Senate, there is no winning. There's only various levels of defeat. And, you know, it just takes forever to get something done in Washington as opposed to when you're a governor. So he missed it.
But he persevered and got himself to the point where he was making a big difference by the time he left.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think he relished his years as governor because he liked to be close to people. He liked to see people. He liked to go out in the communities and touch people. And when the world changed in politics and it became so much more focused on money and media and negative advertising, it was a change that he was never comfortable with because he wanted to be campaigning on the ground with people.
What is the greatest takeaway, Ms. Luallen, that you take away, that you got from Wendell Ford, both working as a volunteer and just and seeing him over the years in his various offices and doing work for Kentucky? What do you take away most from that?
Well, I learned from Wendell Ford that you never forget why you're here in public service. You're here to serve the people who put you here, whatever your position of trust is. He never forgot that. He never forgot where he came from. It didn't matter how powerful he became in Washington or who his allies and relationships were with at that level nationally. He never forgot that he was that boy from Yellow Creek. And that was a valuable lesson for me as I got involved in politics and government was remember why you're here. People have put their trust in you, and you've got to be faithful to that trust.
Thank you.
Thank you, Governor.
Okay.
Thank you.